The economic outlook of the globe continues to teeter on the verge of the pessimistic. The IMF recently lowered world growth prospects and growth rate from 3.2% to 2.7%. Nigeria's growth rate equally, the GDP growth rate has been lowered from about 3.6% to 3.2%. And indeed, in some parts of the world, we're expecting recession in many economies if they haven't already. Some of the larger economies have already declared recession already, and inflation is at decades high in many of those countries. Nigeria equally is seeing 20-year high inflation at 20.77% as we speak. And of course, we're also battling with several issues, including the recent flooding, which is likely to have effect on food inflation and indeed perhaps growth, GDP growth at the end of the day. And talking about monetary policies, the recent Monetary Policy Committee meeting saw a further hike in monetary policy rate by 150 basis points or 1.5% to 15.5%, with cash reserve ratio inching up 5% to 32.5%. The cash reserve ratio is the amount, the proportion of bank deposit that is sterilized and kept at the central bank to ensure that the banks don't just continue doing all the lending and all that. And therefore, the issue then becomes, what are the effects of this on growth? Will increased interest rates not lead to slow growth and indeed maybe another recession for our economy? These are very momentous issues weighing on the minds of the markets and, of course, of manufacturers and indeed every Nigerian. And joining us today to discuss this and also break it down further for the public, the Director, Monetary Policy Department, Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Hassan Mahmood. Doctor, you're highly welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, I gave a little bit of background as well. Yeah. I couldn't speak about everything involved. But some people have been worried about the recent increase in monetary policy rates by the Monetary Policy Committee under the auspices of the Central Bank. What assurance do you have for us?
Thank you very much for having me, and it's nice being here. Several issues, determine how monetary authorities take certain decisions. In recent trend, like you just in your brief background mentioned, the phenomenal growth in the inflation number. Inflation trends globally has been, 4 decades, 5 decades high for the advanced economies. Even for Nigeria, it's looking at 17 years high. Highest rate that we've seen. And the analysis came to the fact that post-COVID, the argument has been because most economies, if not all economies, went into recession, except for countries like China. The argument has been to revive growth, to bring, because there was lockdown, economic activities were not going on, there were a lot of stimulus packages to revive the economy. So the emphasis was growth, and bringing back employment numbers. So there were a lot of stimulus packages, both fiscal and monetary, that went into most of those economies, including foreign inflows for the emerging market and developing economies. We saw the recovery. Most economies had a V-shaped recovery, in the sense that by the second, third quarter, they were already out of the recession. Nigeria was also within 2020 already out of the recession. So by the first quarter of 2021, we already started posting real positive GDP numbers, which is at 3.5%, as you just mentioned. Then in the recent 7-8 months, we started seeing other factors also accounted for it, but even domestically, both food and core inflation numbers were going up. And between June, July to September now, we have or to October, we had 300 to 400 basis point increase in inflation number.
That's 4%.
Yes.
Okay.
Previously, all through 2021. And even before then, we used to have a month-on-month, 20 basis point, 15 basis point. They were quite minimal, kind of. But it's always been trending upward. But now you see what we call a galloping inflation with 100 basis point, 80 basis point for that.
I like to use 1%, 0.8%.
Yes, okay, yes. So 1%.
No, we had financial term.
Yes, we only had one instance. We had 1%. but sometimes we had about 0.9%, 0.8%, growth in the inflation number. And that means that inflation was going phenomenal, exponential growth in inflation. 3 factors was accounting for that. One, yes, recovery has come. We've seen some level of stability. We've seen some pickup in employment numbers, but there was still fragility in the international financial system. So we had this the inflation numbers in the global economy. There's imported inflation that comes to us. Inflation number in the global economy was also skyrocketing. US was getting to like 9%. UK was like 9%. Euro area was almost 8%. Inflation. These are countries that were doing inflation for close to 10 years, less than 2%. With their GDP numbers growing. So we see that also affecting us. We borrow money from them, we import from them, we have business relationship with them. So you have imported inflation type, and you also have cost of funds that are coming into our domestic economy. And then within our own domestic economy, we had issues around security, structural issues that are affecting food production and food delivery to the. We have energy prices coming from the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the shutdown in those oil prices going up, cost of importation of oil, refined product. So we also had that feeding into our own domestic inflation. So inflation numbers were also picking up. So those 2 major factors were key. Then post the COVID, because a lot of countries had interventions to help revive growth, we had what we call pent-up demand. Aggregate demand picked up substantially. There were bottlenecks in supply chain in the sense that the infrastructure could not capture that inflows that were coming in. So you had that also adding to the cost of production and those delays. So prices went up domestically and internationally, globally. So it now led to the fact that yes, structural issues accounted for the inflation numbers we are seeing, but monetary phenomena also came in. Phenomena in the sense that aggregate demand built up. There was a lot of liquidity and cash within the system. We had a targeted credit facility. We had a lot of interventions in manufacturing, over ₦1 trillion. We had in agriculture, anchor borrowers. We had targeted credit facility over 400 billion. The fiscal had the economic sustainability plan, which is almost about 5 trillion. So you had a lot of injections. Coming in. So that built up.
Can we say that the full effect of that deluge of spending that wasn't backed by production or productivity?
Thank you very much.
Have we fully felt it, or are we going to see a scenario where the inflation continues to ratchet up the way it has been?
Yes.
And when is it going to?
The ratchet up effect was coming in the build of the demand, and that means that there was a lot of funds within the system chasing too few goods. So prices went up. So more or less like demand pull now. We had the cost push. But this time around, the argument was we need to tame this demand to be able to bring down this inflation number, phenomenally, significantly. You can go, structurally and go gradually, but the way the inflation numbers are going, and the important thing is that this inflation will completely reverse the growth momentum you've gained, the gains of that growth, because inflation is the denominator of that GDP, and we start real income will now be getting to negative. Even in terms of the investment side or the market side, we also see negative real interest rate in the sense that our inflation is up there, 20.7. Our MPR, even the latest one at 15.5, we still have about 5% or 500 basis points of that gap of negative, which will affect domestic savings mobilization and even inflows. So you see that also affecting capital going on. So the effect of that was to address this aggregate demand, points on the spot, and then we needed to, tame that excessive demand by increasing rates. Increasing rates means cost of funds will be a lot higher. And the argument, like you also mentioned, was, well, are you not looking at growth? Are you not looking at recession coming up? But every economy in the world was also concerned about that inflation.
I'd rather say that the work of central banking indeed is that thankless job of managing several lemmas. As they're chasing one thing, the other one is running away. So, because the first thing that comes to mind is as inflation is going up, inflation is going up, interest rates are going up. What happens to even people who are trying to borrow money, will new business make it into, will companies be able to expand their lines, their production, get into new businesses, employment issues? If companies are not able to employ more people, and then the laying off the few, was that not also cause issues? And how do we even deal with this inflation to take it to our target of maybe 9%, single digit, somehow? What do you see in the future?
Well, from the narrative you gave, there's what we call, these developments are not static. It's dynamic. And policy measures have lag time. It's comparative static. Lag. Yeah, they have a lag time. Over this period, 2020 to now, from the numbers we've injected close to 9 trillion from the central bank side into the economy. Wow. Some of these are going to manufacturing, going to infrastructure, and so you see a gestation period of like 4 or 5 years for that to start crystallizing. But for the fact that what was within the system was above the capacity of the economy to absorb immediately within this short period, we see this built up. So taming that will mean to slow down that pressure, in the sense that because supply is going on, some of those facilities will start production maybe next year or late this year. So we've not started seeing the impact of that on the economy yet. But in subsequent years, you start seeing that building into the build-up of that supply chain, and production level increasing, including productivity, because some of these are also tied to technology, and services is a major driver of the Nigerian economy now. So if that built up quickly, then we'll see that absorbing this cost that you're a bit concerned of, cost of funds, how are people going to be able to borrow? We'll have a lot of these facilities that were on by the central bank, less than 10%. Yes. This 9 trillion, I'm telling you, is less than, at less than 9 to 7 to 9%. Recently, we're just moving to 10 and 11%. So you have that is already building up within the system. We expect that to, increase the supply base and build up this, narrow the excess capacity deficiency that we had, if the infrastructure and other, supporting factors are built into that place. So if that happens, then we'll start seeing costs, prices going down because of the competition, because of the supply that is building up. And then you see the inflation numbers going down quickly. I must even also emphasize, if we've done 3 tightening now, 3 rate increase, 1%, 0.5 and 1%. So you have like almost 3%, 4% increase in the numbers. But you see that the September inflation number was from 20.5 to 0.77. 20.22. Yes, using your own percentage. 0.22. But previously we used to have 0.9, 0.8. 1 point something. Yes. So the definition of inflation is the rate change in the rate of growth of those prices. So if you look at the rate of growth, it has declined. Yes. The inflation number is still up there. Yes, but the rate of growth has declined. If that trend continues, then you start seeing the numbers coming below 2019, which is the projection that we're expecting to see. So technically, that tightening is helping to bring that. Don't forget that the tightening also involves mopping up of liquidity. We also increase CRR, like you mentioned.
That's very interesting aspect. And I was surprised at that leap as well. That's quite some mop-up you're doing, not 1%, 2%, 5% increase.
Yes, because if you see in the money market, you will see that the market was highly depressed, in the sense that even Treasury bill rates, OBB rates was down below 5%, way below the lower bound of the MPR that we are seeing, which is an anomaly in that space. So because that we needed to also pick up that space, even though that would mean higher cost of borrowing for government that are raising Treasury bills and all this stuff. But there are other alternative sources of borrowing that are a lot cheaper that the government can absorb. But we also see that a lot of these funds are not going to lending. We had what we call LDR. Yes, what we call, there's a threshold of 65%, loan to deposit ratio that the central bank gave to banks to lend at least 65% of their bucket of funding deposit out
yes.
for yes.
The central bank had to
So
a
few of the banks were not even meeting that, even with this excess liquidity within the system.
Wow.
Liquidity in the system costs a lot to central bank because we have to mop up those liquidity using OMO, and those OMOs are priced. You know, you have to pay a premium on that for those that you are holding their OMOs.
Okay.
So which brings a lot of funds
Fantastic.
into the system.
I mean, it's a great discussion.
Yeah.
I will quickly go and pay some bills, and then we've been speaking with Dr. Hassan Mahmood, Director of Monetary Policy Department, Central Bank. Stay tuned. Welcome back, viewers, and we'll be speaking on monetary policy issues in Nigeria and, you know, the prospects for the future with Dr. Hassan Mahmood. And welcome back. And before we left, you know, we were talking about you know, the tightening aspect of the recent Monetary Policy Committee decision in terms of increasing the cash reserve ratio by 5%. And I remember that the committee, well, speaking to the central bank governor, said something about, you know, mopping up some of this liquidity that would have otherwise made it into the FX market and also continued to put pressure on the naira and all of that. Well, it was quite a momentous decision. What was the explanation for this?
Yeah, thank you. Like I was building up that scenario. Those excess liquidity, like you rightly mentioned, will demand pressure on FX, which means the naira will depreciate. This depreciation of naira translates to inflation.
Exactly.
It's inflation as a pass-through.
Yes.
So you see that building up there, and when that builds up, because one thing critical about inflation is that those that suffer it most are the most vulnerable. Those that don't have that bargaining power to change their wage numbers or their earnings. You know, people like me and you can find other ways to negotiate negotiate our way through because of the bargaining power we have in our jobs, in different and have access to other sources of earnings. But the most vulnerable are, because at the end of it, the same money that you are earning will be able to fetch you less and less things over the period, to the extent that, so you see more people falling into the extreme poverty line because of inflation alone.
Exactly.
Yes, because they can't be, so they start dropping things in their budget plan, from certain kind of food, from certain kind of items, electricity and stuff like that. So you see the impact is phenomenal. So it is important that that is addressed if you want to create, you know, social coherence, stability within the economy, inclusiveness, and, you know, participatory growth, like they call it. So it is important that central bank address that inflation because of this, you know, importance that is. And there's the other side of it, of which investors, like I mentioned, negative real interest rate, because you don't want the capital, with foreign capital within the economy, to go out, because if they also go out, those people will use naira to buy the dollars. So that will also be a pressure on the FX market, and then you see also depreciation there. That's also translating to inflation. And when all those prices go up, the wage bill demand also goes up. So that means the suppliers or those into production will also have to pay higher for their workers. And if they cannot pay higher for workers, they lay off workers. So you see that also building up to unemployment. So it has, you know, multifaceted negative impact on the economy. So it was important to address that. Now, on the side of that liquidity, like I was explaining, it is important that it is not the total number of deposits within an economy that matters. It is what proportion of that goes out as credit, you know, to the sectors that you think are important for job creation and generation, export stimulation, so that you get FX in to support your demand for FX. There's not, even though we are largely, you know, import dependent and stuff like that, if what we're importing are like infrastructure, services, technology, to build up domestically and also, you know, develop ourselves in those, there's nothing bad about it. But when you have those import dependence on frivolities, clothing, food items.
Many people have criticized your list of 44 items. Anyway,
well, those are demand.
I'm a fan, you know, but oftentimes we see many people, and some of the items include toothpick, water, vegetable, tomatoes. These kind of things that I'm wondering, why can the country not produce? People still insist on importing water into this country. Wow.
But those restrictions have yielded very positive results because you start seeing, like the military, their shoes are produced locally now, the uniform they wear, furniture, most of this is, they're all done
thriving.
We have a lot of wood, timber here, but some of them are exported illegally, and so that they said something is a necessity of invention. You know, so that restriction is paying off now because these companies and businesses are looking inwards. You know, they're looking inwards now and developing those inputs, raw materials that are required because we have them in abundance.
Exactly. I'm a big fan of that. In fact, I say that more items. We should force ourselves. For example, the case of India, before India was split into Pakistan, further into Bangladesh. And I remember the war that Mahatma Gandhi had to fight was on the war on textile. And when he would tie the loincloth called the dhoti, he was always preaching that, look, this is the cloth that we manufacture. Let us use this one. And of course, the British were trying to bring in a lot more textile from Scotland and so on. And it became a major issue. Some allege that that's why it was taken out. I don't know. But look at us. We've lost the textile sector in Nigeria. And the global hub of textiles now Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. You know, so which means that sometimes we need to, if we want, we must have to take a shock therapy at some point in time, rather than just say, let everything come inside. And here we are, we're scrambling for dollars to meet up, you know. So, two things. Number one, to say, what else can we do to salvage the naira? And well, before you answer this, a lot of my friends on the liberal side will say, you know, float the currency. The currency can devalue. It's good to devalue. When you look at the example they give me from China, China's renminbi is about 8 to 9 to the dollar. You know, they keep it within a band, not to entirely make it go to pieces. You know, and if we're not careful, look at where the naira is. So, what's your thinking about that?
We've always mentioned this issue around the FX, in the sense that, you know, there are some analysts that have said that the naira is overvalued, meaning that the naira is supposed to, you need more nairas to get the same level of dollars you get now. If central bank official rates like 420, 435, they're expecting it to be 500, 600 to a dollar, not even talking of the black market rate. So the argument has been that because we are so import dependent, because at the end of it, if you ask the question, what do you need the dollar for?
You
go to England, you go to all, you can't open a dollar account in England.
You can't.
But Nigeria,
why
we
are
also
we
created
encouraging the DOM account? Individuals, civil servants, a vulcanizer, you know, a bricklayer, opening DOM account. In my own view, I think that they are shorting the currency, meaning that they are moving against the naira, because it's so easy to express that opinion. Whereas people may be thinking that, okay, the Nigerian economy compared with the American economy is a bit weak and all of that. But when you give people that ease to be able to buy the dollar, you take the naira and buy the dollar and keep. That's speculation. And it has become democratized. Are you sure we would not, at some point in time, that policy needs to change? Those policies came into being because of the prevailing circumstances then. You know, because sometimes, you know, your policy response must be systematic and such that it doesn't overheat the economy. Exactly. If you know the volume we have in DOM accounts now, it's huge. It's substantial. And if I'm not going to import or I'm going to do business, what do I need the dollar for? Exactly. You know, but now you have commitments, school fees, health, and stuff like that. And those are because some other things are not working. Exactly. Because you can't just say, no, close it. Well, if lecturers have to strive for 8 months, you want your child to finish school, or you want a particular discipline that is not here, you want to send your child abroad. But so you see those necessities or health conditions that you needed to. So you can't restrict
people just because of a particular policy. They have the freedom to, if you decide to go and remove your toothpick in China or in America, it's your business. You can't stop that. But for the economy and the general public, we need to show some responsibility in the sense that the central bank is burdened with the responsibility of ensuring the adequate or appropriate value of its domestic currency. The only reason why you devalue, you mentioned China. For over 30 years, China kept its currency, depreciated because they wanted to export.
Yes.
So, and that helped them for more than 30 years. If you devalue the naira or if you depreciate the naira significantly, what are you exporting?
Exactly.
The oil you're exporting, you don't determine the price.
You don't determine the price.
So now the bank has...
Neither do you determine the volume.
Yes. So there's OPEC quota that restricts what you can produce. So for you to say, okay, just leave it open to bring in these things that you mentioned, no, it will kill our own domestic industries and create more unemployment, and now you will see the recession. But the bank has done two things. One, while our main the central bank's function is short term in the sense that we can only manage demand with the monetary policy tools that you have. You can only manage demand. But even that demand should not be too administrative, because you don't want things like capital control. Globally, that is frowned at. Want competition, free entry and exit in that space to bring those inflows. But also, on the structural side, you need to get in the supply. There was a time we were having 60 billion external reserve of the central bank. Central bank can pump in 2 billion in a day, to moderate the price. But when you are now having restriction, no inflows from oil revenue, other factors are playing out. We need to service our debt. So you have more precious things to do with the FX. So there was a need to, one, manage the demand for the short term, and two, for the long to medium term, improve the supply. And one thing the bank has done significantly there is this R3200 that we're doing now.
Oh, yes. That's R3200.
And that R3200 started this year.
And what does that mean, for the layman? How do you break it down?
Raise to $200 billion.
Raise to $200 billion.
What it means
inflow
for non-export.
Non-oil export.
We've seen the volatility we got from oil export. Now, the oil sector contributes less than 8%, 7-8% to GDP. You see agricultural manufacturing services taking the other 70-60% of their contribution to GDP. One, because the backward integration of the oil sector is minimal compared to agriculture, manufacturing, SMEs, and services, it is important that we diversify to those sectors so that this teeming population that we have, the youths and all the stuff, the argument now globally is participatory growth, inclusive growth. Growth that reduce poverty.
Economic inclusion.
More
than financial inclusion.
Yes, economic inclusion.
It's important. In the economy.
Reduce poverty and stuff like that. And that is where economy is beneficial. So if we're going to face that side, then the RT200 was non-oil export. And the non-oil export that is even been the one with value addition, not raw. Very important. Not raw cocoa, but a bit processed, even if it's cashew, roasted and packaged. Sesame seeds.
Ginger,
so
soya bean.
That alone that started February this year.
Yes.
By the end of the year, it's going to close to bringing in about $3 billion.
Fantastic.
We started with just $62 million, grew to $300 million. The next third quarter now we're looking at $200 to $900 million. So by next year, you're seeing that bringing in about $1 billion.
Fantastic.
In a year. So the argument has been to bring to $2 billion.
Exactly.
Every
Fantastic. Year. Thank you so much. I'm afraid my producer has said our time is up. I have to lay this to you because I have to still come back and drag you down after maybe 3 weeks or thereabouts. And I want to thank you for finding the time to come on the show.
I'm always very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You've been watching The Nationalist, and we've been discussing critical issues in monetary policy, FX, and what have you. Thanks for staying tuned. See you next week.